In the bustling corridors of power in Washington, D.C., Judge Amy Coney Barrett found herself facing an opponent she hadn't expected, Leavitt, a lawyer whose rise to prominence seemed almost magical. Leavitt wasn't like other lawyers or judges. He didn't come from the usual background of prestigious law schools and years of courtroom experience. Instead, he was someone who had built his reputation on creativity, bold ideas, and an uncanny ability to connect with people. While some admired him for his fresh approach, others saw him as unpredictable and even risky. Barrett, on the other hand, was known for her discipline, precision, and deep respect for tradition. She had spent years honing her craft, earning degrees from top institutions and serving as a respected judge. Her life revolved around upholding the law, respecting precedent, and ensuring fairness through careful interpretation of legal texts. To her, the judiciary wasn't just a profession, it was a sacred responsibility. So when news broke that Leavitt might be appointed to a key federal position, Barrett felt uneasy. Leavitt's nomination came at a time when tensions were already high. The political climate was charged, and debates over judicial reform were raging louder than ever. People were divided about what kind of leadership the courts needed. Some argued for sticking to tried-and-true methods, while others called for sweeping changes to make the system more inclusive and accessible. Leavitt represented the latter group, a voice for innovation and change. But Barrett believed that such drastic shifts could destabilize the very foundation of justice itself. It wasn't long before whispers reached Barrett's ears about Leavitt's plans. Rumors suggested that once confirmed, he intended to push forward controversial reforms that would challenge long-standing legal principles. These weren't minor tweaks either. They were proposals that would fundamentally alter how certain laws were applied. For Barrett, this was alarming. She feared that if someone without traditional training took charge, it could lead to decisions that ignored decades of wisdom accumulated by seasoned jurists. Determined to act, Barrett began, quietly gathering support among her peers. She drafted memos outlining her concerns, highlighting potential risks associated with Leavitt's appointment. She pointed out gaps in his qualifications and questioned whether his methods aligned with the rigorous standards required for such a critical role. Her arguments were sharp, well-reasoned, and rooted in years of experience. Many colleagues agreed with her, nodding solemnly as they read her carefully worded documents. But there was something about Leavitt that made Barrett uneasy. He wasn't just another name on paper. He was charismatic, intelligent, and incredibly persuasive. Even those who disagreed with him couldn't help but admire his energy and passion. Barrett knew that opposing him wouldn't be easy. This wasn't going to be a straightforward battle of logic versus emotion. It was going to be much more complex than that. As Barrett prepared her case, she thought back to her own journey. Growing up, she had always been drawn to the idea of fairness. Whether it was standing up for classmates being treated unfairly or debating ethical dilemmas during family dinners, she had always believed in doing what was right. That belief had driven her to pursue law, where she hoped to make a difference. Now standing at this crossroads, she wondered if stopping Leavitt was truly the best way to protect justice, or if there was another path she hadn't considered yet. Meanwhile, Leavitt was busy building his own coalition. Unlike Barrett, who relied on formal channels and official procedures, Leavitt thrived on personal connections. He traveled across the country, meeting ordinary citizens, listening to their stories, and promising to bring their voices into the halls of power. His campaign wasn't polished like traditional politicians' efforts. Instead, it was raw, heartfelt, and deeply human. Everywhere he went, crowds gathered, eager to hear him speak. They saw in him a chance for real change, a break from the status quo. The contrast between Barrett and Leavitt couldn't have been starker. Where Barrett valued order, structure, and adherence to rules, Leavitt embraced chaos, creativity, and flexibility. Yet, despite their differences, both shared a common goal: to serve justice. The problem was that they defined justice in entirely different ways. For Barrett, it meant preserving the integrity of the legal system, ensuring that every decision was grounded in established principles. For Leavitt, it meant breaking free from outdated norms and creating solutions tailored to modern challenges. As the days turned into weeks, the stakes grew higher. Barrett poured all her energy into halting Leavitt's nomination, working tirelessly behind the scenes. She met with influential figures, wrote op-eds, and strategized with allies. But no matter how hard she tried, she couldn't shake off the feeling that this fight was unlike anything she'd faced before. It wasn't just about winning or losing. It was about confronting a worldview that challenged everything she held dear. Little did Barrett know, however, that this conflict would take unexpected turns. What started as a clash of ideologies would soon evolve into something far more nuanced and transformative for both of them. As events unfolded, neither Barrett nor Leavitt could predict how profoundly this rivalry would shape not only their careers, but also their understanding of justice itself. The tension between Judge Amy Coney Barrett and Leavitt reached its boiling point during a closed-door meeting of the Judicial Oversight Committee. This wasn't just another routine gathering. It was a pivotal moment where decisions would shape the future of the judiciary. Barrett had spent weeks preparing for this day, meticulously crafting her arguments against Leavitt's appointment. She knew that if she could sway even a handful of committee members, she might succeed in halting his term before it began. When the session started, Barrett took her seat with quiet confidence. Her notes were neatly organized, her thoughts clear, and her resolve unwavering. As the discussion turned to Leavitt's nomination, she rose to speak. With calm authority, she outlined her concerns, presenting each point like pieces of a puzzle fitting together perfectly. First, she questioned the procedural irregularities surrounding his nomination, pointing out inconsistencies in how candidates were typically vetted. Then she highlighted what she saw as glaring gaps in Leavitt's qualifications, emphasizing his lack of formal judicial training compared to others who had held similar positions. Her voice carried weight, commanding attention. She spoke about the importance of precedent and stability in the legal system, warning that appointing someone without traditional credentials could set a dangerous example. Justice is not just about good intentions, she said firmly, looking directly at the committee members. It requires experience, discipline, and an understanding of the complexities involved. Without these foundations, we risk undermining the very principles we are sworn to uphold. As Barrett concluded her remarks, there was a palpable shift in the room. Several committee members exchanged glances, nodding slowly as they absorbed her words. Some scribbled notes, clearly impressed by the clarity and logic of her argument. For a brief moment, Barrett allowed herself to feel hopeful. Perhaps this was the turning point she had been working toward. But then it was Leavitt's turn to respond, and he did so with a flair that caught everyone off guard. Rising from his seat, he smiled warmly at the committee, exuding charm and confidence. Unlike Barrett's methodical approach, Leavitt's style was conversational and engaging. He didn't rely on dense legal jargon or complex theories. Instead, he told stories, personal anecdotes that painted vivid pictures of real people struggling within the current system. He began by recounting the story of Maria, a single mother he'd met while volunteering at a community center years ago. Maria worked 2 jobs but still struggled to provide for her children because of outdated child support laws that failed to account for modern realities. When she sought help, she found the legal process overwhelming and inaccessible. Maria isn't alone, Leavitt said, his tone softening. There are millions like her, ordinary Americans who feel shut out by a system designed for those with resources and connections. If we don't adapt, we're failing them. His words struck a chord. Committee members leaned forward, listening intently as he continued. Leavitt admitted that he didn't have decades of courtroom experience, but he argued that this was precisely why he was needed. Sometimes fresh eyes can see problems that others overlook, he explained. I'm not here to tear down the system, I'm here to fix it, to make it work better for everyone, not just the privileged few. Leavitt went on to address Barrett's criticisms head-on. He acknowledged the value of precedent but challenged the notion that tradition should always take precedence over progress. Respect for history doesn't mean clinging to practices that no longer serve us, he said passionately. True justice evolves. It listens, learns, and grows. And right now our system needs to evolve. For the first time since the meeting began, Barrett felt uneasy. She had anticipated a debate rooted in facts and figures, a battle of intellects, where her expertise would shine. But Leavitt wasn't playing by those rules. He was appealing to emotions, values, and shared humanity. His arguments weren't just logical. They were deeply personal, resonating with parts of the human experience that couldn't be quantified. As Leavitt wrapped up his remarks, the atmosphere in the room had shifted dramatically. Some committee members looked visibly moved, their expressions reflecting a mix of admiration and contemplation. Others seemed conflicted, torn between Barrett's measured reasoning and Leavitt's impassioned plea for change. Even Barrett herself couldn't deny the power of his words. Though she disagreed with his methods, she couldn't ignore the sincerity behind them. After both sides had spoken, the committee chair called for a short recess. As members filed out of the room, murmurs filled the air. Some praised Barrett's professionalism and depth of knowledge, while others expressed admiration for Leavitt's vision and ability to connect with everyday people. The divide was clear. Barrett represented stability and tradition, while Leavitt embodied innovation and accessibility. During the break, Barrett retreated to a quiet corner, replaying the events in her mind. She had prepared extensively, anticipating every possible counter-argument. Yet nothing could have prepared her for the emotional impact of Leavitt's storytelling. It wasn't just rhetoric, it was genuine, heartfelt, and impossible to dismiss outright. For the first time, she wondered whether opposing him was truly serving justice, or if she was missing something crucial. Back in the meeting room, the session resumed, but the dynamic had changed. When Barrett spoke again, her tone was slightly less combative, more reflective. She reiterated her concerns but also acknowledged the importance of addressing systemic inequities. Leavitt, sensing a subtle shift, responded graciously, thanking Barrett for her dedication and offering to collaborate on finding common ground. By the end of the meeting, no definitive decision had been made. The committee agreed to deliberate further before reaching a conclusion. But for Barrett, the encounter left a lasting impression. She realized that this wasn't just a battle of ideas. It was a clash of perspectives, each valid in its own way. And as much as she wanted to stop Leavitt, she couldn't shake the feeling that there was more to his vision than she had initially understood. Walking out of the room, Barrett felt a mix of frustration and curiosity. Frustration because she hadn't achieved the outcome she desired, and curiosity because she couldn't help but wonder, was there a way to bridge the gap between tradition and progress? Could justice truly evolve without losing its essence? These questions lingered in her mind, hinting at challenges yet to come and opportunities she hadn't foreseen. After the intense meeting with the Judicial Oversight Committee, Judge Amy Coney Barrett returned to her chambers feeling unsettled. For days, she had been consumed by her mission to block Leavitt's appointment, convinced that his lack of traditional credentials posed a threat to the judiciary's integrity. But now, as she sat alone in her quiet office, surrounded by stacks of legal texts and neatly organized files, doubts began creeping into her mind. Barrett decided to dig deeper into Leavitt's background. She wanted to understand what made him tick, what drove him to challenge the status quo so boldly. Late at night, when the courthouse was empty and silence enveloped the halls, she pulled up old interviews, articles, and transcripts of speeches he had given over the years. At first, she approached this research with skepticism, expecting to find evidence that would reinforce her concerns. But as she read through his words, something unexpected happened. She started seeing glimpses of sincerity and depth that contradicted her initial assumptions. One interview stood out to her. In it, Leavitt spoke candidly about his childhood growing up in a working-class neighborhood. He described how his family struggled financially, relying on food stamps and community assistance to get by. His father worked long hours at a factory, while his mother juggled multiple part-time jobs. Despite their hardships, they instilled in him a strong sense of fairness and resilience. "I learned early on that life isn't always fair," Leavitt said in the interview. "But I also learned that fairness is worth fighting for." He went on to share a pivotal moment from his teenage years, a close friend who got caught up in the criminal justice system after making a single mistake. According to Leavitt, the punishment far outweighed the offense, derailing his friend's future and leaving him trapped in a cycle of poverty and recidivism. That experience, he explained, ignited a passion within him to advocate for reform. It wasn't just about changing laws. It was about giving people second chances and ensuring that the system treated everyone with dignity. Reading these accounts, Barrett felt a pang of empathy. While their lives were vastly different, she came from a stable, educated family with access to opportunities. He reminded her of the stories she'd heard throughout her career. Stories of individuals who fell through the cracks of the legal system, victims of circumstances beyond their control. She had always believed in the law's ability to provide justice, but hearing Leavitt's perspective forced her to confront uncomfortable questions. Had the system truly served those marginalized voices? Or had it perpetuated cycles of inequality? Meanwhile, Leavitt faced challenges of his own. Though his charisma and unconventional approach had won him admirers, they also attracted fierce criticism. Traditionalists accused him of being reckless, warning that his reforms could destabilize the judiciary. Some even questioned his motives, suggesting that he was more interested in fame than genuine change. The pressure mounted as opponents launched smear campaigns, painting him as inexperienced and unqualified. Despite the backlash, Leavitt remained steadfast. He spent hours engaging with critics, listening to their concerns, and explaining his vision. During one particularly heated debate on a news program, a seasoned legal analyst grilled him relentlessly, accusing him of undermining centuries of judicial tradition. Leavitt didn't flinch. Instead, he calmly acknowledged the importance of precedent, but argued that traditions should evolve alongside society. Respect doesn't mean stagnation, he said firmly. It means improving upon what we've inherited, so it serves everyone better. His response earned applause from some viewers, but it didn't silence his detractors. Supporters urged him to stay true to his principles, reminding him that bold ideas often faced resistance. Yet privately, Leavitt wrestled with self-doubt. Was he doing enough? Could he live up to the expectations placed upon him? These thoughts weighed heavily on him, especially late at night when the noise of public opinion faded away. Amidst their individual struggles, both Barrett and Leavitt found themselves reflecting on the broader purpose of justice. For Barrett, it was about preserving order and fairness through careful interpretation of the law. For Leavitt, it was about breaking down barriers and creating a system that reflected the realities of modern life. Though their methods differed, they shared a fundamental belief in justice, not as an abstract concept but as something deeply human. One evening, Barrett stumbled upon a speech Leavitt had delivered at a community center. In it, he talked about the importance of empathy and leadership. Justice isn't just about rules and procedures, he said. It's about understanding people, their hopes, fears, and dreams. If we lose sight of that, we lose sight of why we're here in the first place. Those words resonated with Barrett, stirring memories of her own journey. She remembered the countless hours she had spent poring over case files, searching for solutions that balanced compassion with legality. Wasn't that, too, a form of empathy? As the days passed, Barrett began to see Leavitt not just as an adversary, but as someone driven by a genuine desire to make a difference. His methods might have been unorthodox, but his intentions seemed sincere. This realization didn't erase her concerns entirely, but it softened her stance. She realized that opposing him outright wasn't going to solve anything. It might even hinder progress. Perhaps there was another way forward, one that combined the strengths of both their approaches. Leavitt, too, found himself reevaluating his position. Critics like Barrett had raised valid points about the risks of moving too quickly or disregarding established norms. He knew that lasting change required collaboration, not confrontation. As much as he believed in his vision, he understood that implementing it would require patience, compromise, and dialogue. For the first time, he considered reaching out to Barrett, not as an opponent but as a potential ally. Though neither of them acted on these thoughts immediately, the seeds of understanding had been planted. What had started as a fierce rivalry was beginning to transform into something more nuanced. Both Barrett and Leavitt were grappling with the same core question: How do you balance tradition and innovation in pursuit of justice? Their answers may have differed, but their shared commitment to fairness hinted at the possibility of finding common ground. In the quiet moments between meetings, debates, and late-night reflections, both figures felt a shift. They were no longer simply defending their positions, they were questioning, learning, and growing. And though neither realized it yet, this internal transformation would pave the way for an unexpected alliance, one that would challenge their beliefs, test their resolve, and ultimately redefine their understanding of justice itself. Fate has a way of intervening when least expected, and for Judge Amy Coney Barrett and Leavitt, it arrived in the form of a charity gala. The event was held at a grand ballroom in downtown Washington, D.C., its sparkling chandeliers casting warm light over tables adorned with elegant centerpieces. Hosted by a prominent civil rights organization, the evening honored trailblazers who had dedicated their lives to advancing equality and justice. Both Barrett and Leavitt were invited, Barrett because of her distinguished career in law, and Leavitt due to his rising influence as a reformer. At first, neither seemed particularly thrilled about attending. Barrett viewed such events as obligatory social gatherings, where small talk often overshadowed meaningful conversation. Leavitt, on the other hand, dreaded the formalities. He preferred grassroots settings where he could connect directly with people rather than navigate stiff pleasantries. Still, they both showed up, dressed impeccably and carrying polite smiles that masked their underlying tensions. The seating arrangements turned out to be serendipitous, or perhaps deliberate. As guests took their places, Barrett noticed with mild surprise that she was seated next to none other than Leavitt. For a moment she considered switching seats, but etiquette dictated otherwise. Resigned, she nodded politely as he greeted her with a warm smile. "Good evening, Judge Barrett," he said, his tone friendly yet respectful. "Small world, isn't it?" Barrett managed a curt nod. "Mr. Leavitt," she replied evenly, keeping her voice neutral. They exchanged brief pleasantries about the weather and the venue's decor, but the air between them remained thick with unspoken tension. It was clear that neither wanted to delve into deeper topics, not yet anyway. As dinner progressed, however, the atmosphere began to shift. Guests around them engaged in lively conversations, discussing everything from landmark court cases to current political debates. Barrett found herself drawn into these discussions, offering insights rooted in her years of experience. Leavitt, too, chimed in occasionally, sharing anecdotes from his work with marginalized communities. Their contrasting perspectives sparked curiosity among those seated nearby, prompting questions that nudged them closer to engaging directly with each other. It started innocuously enough. A guest asked Leavitt about his vision for judicial reform, and he responded passionately, emphasizing the need for accessibility and inclusivity. Barrett listened intently, her expression unreadable. When the guest turned to her for a counterpoint, she spoke thoughtfully, highlighting the importance of maintaining legal standards and precedent. What followed was a spirited exchange, not hostile, but charged with intellectual energy. Their differing views became more apparent as the conversation deepened. Leavitt argued that rigid adherence to tradition sometimes hindered progress, citing examples of outdated laws that disproportionately affected vulnerable populations. Barrett countered that abandoning foundational principles risked undermining the rule of law itself. Yet, despite their disagreements, there was an undeniable mutual respect in how they addressed each other. Neither resorted to personal attacks or dismissive remarks. Instead, they challenged each other's ideas with logic and evidence. As dessert was served, the group drifted into lighter topics, giving Barrett and Leavitt a chance to pause. Seizing the opportunity, Leavitt leaned slightly toward Barrett and said, "You know, I've always admired your dedication to the law. Your arguments are sharp, and your commitment is inspiring." Barrett raised an eyebrow, surprised by the compliment. "Thank you," she said cautiously. "Though I suspect we still disagree on quite a bit." Leavitt chuckled softly. "Of course we do. But disagreement doesn't mean disrespect. In fact, I think our differences make us stronger if we're willing to listen." His words lingered in the air, prompting Barrett to reflect. She realized that while their philosophies clashed, they shared a common goal: to serve justice. This realization softened her demeanor, and for the first time, she allowed herself to see Leavitt not just as an opponent, but as someone genuinely invested in making a difference. Encouraged by her subtle shift, Leavitt opened up further. He shared stories from his past, moments of triumph and failure that shaped his worldview. He spoke about the struggles he witnessed growing up and how they fueled his determination to create change. His vulnerability caught Barrett off guard. She had expected him to be polished and calculated, but here he was, revealing parts of himself that felt raw and authentic. In turn, Barrett shared glimpses of her own journey. She talked about her early days as a lawyer, the mentors who guided her, and the values that anchored her decisions. She admitted that while she believed strongly in preserving legal traditions, she also recognized the need for compassion and adaptability. Her honesty intrigued Leavitt, who saw layers to her character that went beyond the stern judge persona he had encountered during their clashes. By the end of the evening, the initial awkwardness between them had melted away. They parted ways with a handshake and a promise to stay in touch, a gesture neither had anticipated at the start of the night. As Barrett walked to her car, she replayed the conversation in her mind. Leavitt wasn't the caricature she had painted him to be. He was complex, driven, and deeply human. And though their differences remained, she couldn't deny the value of hearing him out. For Leavitt, the encounter left a similar impression. Barrett's intellect and integrity commanded respect, even if her methods differed from his own. He realized that opposing voices weren't necessarily enemies. They could be allies in disguise, offering perspectives that enriched the broader dialogue. That night marked a turning point in their relationship. What had begun as a rivalry rooted in mistrust and ideological divides evolved into something far more nuanced. They hadn't resolved their differences, nor had they abandoned their respective stances. But they had taken the first step toward understanding each other, a step that would prove crucial in the days to come. As they returned to their separate worlds, both Barrett and Leavitt carried with them a newfound appreciation for the complexity of justice. It wasn't a black and white concept confined to textbooks or courtrooms. It was alive, dynamic, and deeply intertwined with human experiences. And though their paths might continue to diverge, they now understood that collaboration and, perhaps even compromise, could lead to outcomes neither could achieve alone. Despite the unexpected connection forged at the charity gala, Judge Amy Coney Barrett remained steadfast in her mission to halt Leavitt's appointment. The evening had softened her perception of him, but it hadn't erased her concerns about the potential risks he posed to the judiciary. For Barrett, the stakes were too high to simply step aside and let events unfold without further action. She believed that tradition and precedent were the bedrock of justice, and she couldn't stand idly by while someone with unconventional methods threatened to upend decades of established norms. Barrett decided to take one final, decisive step, filing a formal objection to Leavitt's nomination. This wasn't an impulsive move. It was a carefully calculated strategy designed to bring attention to what she saw as critical flaws in his qualifications. Drawing on her extensive legal expertise, she drafted a detailed document outlining her arguments. She cited constitutional principles, procedural irregularities, and the potential consequences of appointing someone without traditional judicial training. Her language was measured yet forceful, leaving no room for ambiguity about her position. When the objection was submitted, it sent ripples through both political and legal circles. Allies rallied around Barrett, praising her courage and conviction. Critics accused her of being overly rigid, clinging to outdated ideals rather than embracing progress. Meanwhile, Leavitt found himself thrust back into the spotlight, this time under even greater scrutiny. Reporters hounded him for comments, opponents seized the opportunity to amplify their attacks, and supporters urged him to fight back with equal vigor. But instead of lashing out or mounting a defensive campaign, Leavitt chose a different path, one that surprised everyone, including Barrett. During a televised interview scheduled shortly after the objection became public, Leavitt addressed the controversy head-on. Rather than attacking Barrett or dismissing her concerns, he expressed gratitude for her dedication to the law. "Judge, Barrett has every right to question my qualifications," he said calmly, looking directly into the camera. "Her commitment to upholding standards is something we should all respect." He then went on to acknowledge the validity of some of her criticisms. He admitted that his lack of formal judicial experience might raise legitimate concerns, but he framed it not as a weakness, but as an asset. "I don't claim to have all the answers," he continued. "What I do bring is a fresh perspective, one informed by years of working directly with people who feel alienated by the system. My goal isn't to dismantle the judiciary, it's to make it more responsive to the needs of everyone, not just those who already understand how it works." Leavitt's humility disarmed many viewers, including some of Barrett's closest allies. By refusing to engage in a tit-for-tat battle, and instead offering thoughtful reflections, he positioned himself not as an adversary, but as a collaborator seeking solutions. He pledged to work closely with skeptics like Barrett to ensure that any reforms he pursued respected foundational principles. "If I'm fortunate enough to serve in this role," he concluded, "I want to do so alongside people like Judge Barrett, people who challenge me to think harder, dig deeper, and always prioritize justice above all else." The interview marked a turning point in public perception. While opinions remained divided, many began to see Leavitt in a new light, not as a reckless innovator, but as someone willing to listen and adapt. His willingness to acknowledge criticism and express openness to collaboration won over skeptics, who had previously dismissed him outright. Even Barrett, watching the interview from her office, felt a pang of unease. For weeks she had been preparing herself for a contentious showdown, but Leavitt's response left her speechless. It wasn't just his words that unsettled her, it was the sincerity behind them. Leavitt's acknowledgement of her concerns felt genuine, devoid of the performative politeness often seen in political discourse. It forced her to confront uncomfortable truths about her own motivations. Was she opposing him purely out of principle, or was there a part of her that feared change? Had her focus on tradition blinded her to the possibility that innovation could coexist with stability? As these questions swirled in her mind, Barrett faced growing pressure from her own camp. Allies urged her to escalate her efforts, warning that backing down now would be seen as a sign of weakness. Some even suggested launching a media blitz to counter Leavitt's newfound popularity. But Barrett hesitated. For the first time, she questioned whether continuing down this path aligned with her ultimate goal, serving justice. She spent hours reflecting on the values that had guided her throughout her career. Justice, she reminded herself, wasn't about winning arguments or proving others wrong. It was about fairness, integrity, and ensuring that the system worked for everyone. If halting Leavitt's term meant stifling meaningful dialogue and shutting down opportunities for growth, was it truly serving justice? Meanwhile, Leavitt continued to navigate the storm surrounding his nomination. Supporters praised his grace, under fire, while detractors doubled down on their attacks. Yet through it all, he maintained his composure, focusing on building bridges rather than burning them. He reached out to several key figures within the judiciary, inviting them to discuss ways to address systemic inequities without compromising core principles. Though some declined his invitations, others accepted, intrigued by his willingness to engage constructively. One such meeting took place in a quiet conference room at a neutral location. Leavitt sat across from a group of seasoned jurists, including some who had initially opposed his nomination. The discussion was candid and occasionally tense, but it was also productive. Participants exchanged ideas, challenged assumptions, and explored potential compromises. Leavitt listened intently, taking notes and asking thoughtful questions. By the end of the session, even his harshest critics admitted that he brought valuable insights to the table. Back in her chambers, Barrett wrestled with her decision. She knew that withdrawing her objection would invite backlash from those who supported her stance. Yet, she also recognized that opposing Leavitt solely based on ideological differences risked missing an opportunity for meaningful collaboration. After much deliberation, she made a choice, one that shocked nearly everyone involved. In a rare public statement, Barrett announced that while she still harbored reservations about certain aspects of Leavitt's approach, she trusted the judiciary's ability to uphold standards and guide his efforts toward constructive outcomes. "Justice evolves," she wrote, echoing Leavitt's earlier remarks. "And though our paths may differ, our shared commitment to fairness binds us together. It is my hope that we can continue to engage in open dialogue, challenging each other, to build a system that serves all Americans." The statement sent shockwaves through the legal community. Some hailed it as a testament to Barrett's integrity and wisdom, applauding her willingness to rise above partisan divides. Others criticized her for abandoning her principles, accusing her of caving to pressure. But for Barrett, the decision wasn't about pleasing anyone. It was about staying true to her belief in justice, even when it required difficult compromises. For Leavitt, Barrett's statement was a powerful gesture of goodwill. It signaled a shift in their relationship, from adversaries to potential partners in shaping the future of the judiciary. Grateful for her acknowledgement, he publicly thanked her, reiterating his commitment to working collaboratively with everyone, regardless of their initial stance. As the dust settled, both figures found themselves transformed by the experience. What had begun as a bitter rivalry had evolved into a complex dance of mutual respect and understanding. They hadn't resolved all their differences. In fact, many remained, but they had taken a crucial step toward bridging the gap between tradition and innovation. In doing so, they demonstrated that even the fiercest opponents could find common ground when guided by a shared vision of justice. The road ahead wouldn't be easy. Challenges loomed large, and disagreements would undoubtedly arise. But for the first time, Barrett and Leavitt approached the future not as adversaries, but as collaborators. Two individuals committed to improving a system they both cherished, albeit in vastly different ways. Their journey served as a reminder that progress often requires listening, learning, and embracing the complexities of human experience. And in that complexity lay the true essence of justice. With Judge Amy Coney Barrett's decision to step back from opposing Leavitt's appointment, the stage was set for a new chapter, not just in their personal journeys but also in the broader landscape of justice. The ripple effects of their evolving relationship began to manifest almost immediately, reshaping how people viewed the judiciary and its potential for transformation. What had once seemed like an insurmountable divide between tradition and innovation now appeared as fertile ground for collaboration. Leavitt's term officially began amidst a mix of anticipation and skepticism. Critics remained vocal, questioning whether his unconventional methods would hold up under scrutiny. Supporters, however, were energized by the prospect of meaningful change. From the outset, Leavitt made it clear that he intended to honor his promises while respecting the foundations of the legal system. He assembled a diverse team of advisors, including seasoned jurists, policy experts, and community advocates. Among them was someone whose inclusion surprised many, Judge Barrett herself. Barrett's involvement wasn't formal or official. She hadn't joined Leavitt's staff or taken on any advisory role. Instead, she became a sounding board, someone Leavitt consulted regularly when navigating complex decisions. Their conversations often took place over coffee in quiet corners of D.C., far removed from the glare of public attention. These meetings weren't about agreeing on everything. Rather, they were opportunities to challenge each other's perspectives and find common ground. One such discussion occurred during a particularly contentious case involving sentencing reform. Leavitt proposed measures aimed at reducing mandatory minimums for nonviolent offenses, arguing that these policies disproportionately affected marginalized communities. Barrett listened intently, then raised concerns about the potential risks of undermining judicial discretion. "If we strip away guidelines entirely," she said, "we risk creating inconsistency across courts. That could erode trust in the system." Leavitt nodded thoughtfully. "I see your point," he replied. "But isn't there a middle ground? Perhaps we can retain some structure while introducing more flexibility for judges to consider individual circumstances." Together, they brainstormed solutions, drawing on both Barrett's expertise and precedent and Leavitt's insights into real-world impacts. The final proposal balanced standardization with adaptability, earning praise from stakeholders on all sides. It was a small victory, but one that exemplified the power of collaboration. As months passed, Leavitt implemented several groundbreaking reforms, each shaped by input from unlikely allies like Barrett. One initiative focused on increasing access to legal resources for underserved populations. Recognizing that many Americans struggled to navigate the complexities of the court system, Leavitt championed programs that provided free legal aid, simplified paperwork, and offered educational workshops. Barrett contributed by suggesting safeguards to ensure these efforts adhered to ethical standards, preventing well-intentioned initiatives from inadvertently causing harm. Another major reform targeted bail practices, which had long been criticized for perpetuating inequality. Leavitt advocated for eliminating cash bail for low-level offenses, replacing it with risk assessments tailored to individual cases. Barrett initially expressed reservations, fearing that such changes might compromise public safety. But after reviewing data and engaging in lengthy debates, she came around to supporting a pilot program. Early results showed promising outcomes. Fewer people languished in jail before trial, and crime rates remained stable. These successes didn't come without challenges. Resistance from entrenched interests persisted, and not every reform succeeded. Some proposals faced pushback from lawmakers unwilling to embrace change, while others encountered logistical hurdles during implementation. Yet, through it all, Leavitt and Barrett demonstrated resilience. They approached setbacks not as failures, but as learning opportunities, refining their strategies based on feedback and evidence. Their partnership extended beyond policy work. Both recognized the importance of fostering dialogue within the judiciary itself. Leavitt organized forums where judges, lawyers, and community members could engage in open discussions about systemic inequities. Barrett participated actively, using her platform to encourage colleagues to confront uncomfortable truths. Together, they helped create spaces where differing viewpoints could coexist, paving the way for deeper understanding and mutual respect. Over time, the dynamic between Barrett and Leavitt evolved further. What had started as cautious cooperation blossomed into genuine friendship. They discovered shared hobbies, both enjoyed classical music, and occasionally attended concerts together. These moments of levity strengthened their bond, reminding them that despite their professional roles, they were human beings with passions and vulnerabilities. Public perception of their alliance shifted dramatically. Initially met with skepticism, their collaboration gradually earned widespread admiration. Commentators hailed it as a model for bipartisan cooperation, proof that ideological differences needn't preclude productive partnerships. For many, it served as a beacon of hope, a reminder that progress was possible even in polarized times. Reflecting on their journey, both Barrett and Leavitt acknowledged how much they had grown. Barrett realized that while tradition remained vital, it couldn't exist in isolation. It needed to evolve alongside society. Leavitt, meanwhile, learned the value of patience and humility, recognizing that bold ideas required careful execution to avoid unintended consequences. Their story culminated in a joint address at a national conference on judicial reform. Standing side by side on stage, they delivered speeches that complemented each other perfectly. Barrett spoke first, emphasizing the enduring importance of principles like fairness, integrity, and accountability. She reminded the audience that justice wasn't static. It was a living ideal that demanded constant vigilance and adaptation. When Leavitt took the podium, he echoed her sentiments while adding his own perspective. "Justice is about people," he said, his voice resonating through the hall. "It's about ensuring that everyone, regardless of background, has a fair shot at success. And achieving that requires us to listen, learn, and grow together." The applause that followed was thunderous, a testament to the impact of their combined efforts. As they stepped off stage, Barrett turned to Leavitt with a smile. "We've come a long way," she remarked softly. Leavitt grinned. "And we're just getting started." In the years that followed, their legacy endured. The reforms they championed became benchmarks for future generations, inspiring others to tackle tough issues with creativity and courage. More importantly, their partnership demonstrated that true leadership transcended ideology. By embracing empathy, humility, and a shared commitment to justice, they proved that even the fiercest rivals could unite to create lasting change. Their journey wasn't perfect. No journey ever is, but it was profoundly impactful. Through their struggles and triumphs, Barrett and Leavitt taught the world an invaluable lesson: that progress lies not in choosing between tradition and innovation, but in finding harmony between the two. And in doing so, they redefined what justice meant, not as an abstract concept, but as something deeply human, rooted in connection, compassion, and the relentless pursuit of fairness for all.